Love it. Love it. Love it. I've always been love it. 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 Love it.
Hello, welcome to another night of stories. Tonight we're going to be reading The Nightingale by Hans Christian Andersen. In China, as you know, the emperor is a Chinaman too. The following story happened many years ago, but that is just why it is worth hearing it before it is forgotten. The emperor's castle was the most beautiful in the world and was entirely of fine porcelain. It was very costly, but so brittle and delicate to touch that one had to be very careful. In the garden were seen the most wonderful flowers, to the finest of which tinkling silver bells were tied, lest people should pass without noticing them. Indeed, everything in the emperor's garden was well thought out, and it was such a large one that the gardener himself did not know where it ended. If you kept on walking, you came to a noble forest with high trees and deep lakes. The forest sloped straight down to the deep blue sea, and large ships could sail right up under the branches of the trees. In one of these trees there lived a nightingale who sang so beautifully that even the poor fishermen, who had plenty of other things to do, would stop and listen when, on going and out at night to spread their nests, they heard it sing. Heavens, how beautiful it is, they would say, but they had to attend to their work and forgot the bird. So if it sang again next night, the fishermen came that way, and they would again exclaim, "How beautiful that bird sings." Travelers came from every country in the world to the emperor's city, which they admired very much, as well as the castle and the garden. But when they heard the nightingale, they would exclaim, "That is the best of all." And when the travelers returned home, they told of these things, and the learned ones wrote many books about the town, the castle, and the garden. Neither did they forget the nightingale. That was the most praised of all. And those who could write poetry wrote most beautiful poems about the nightingale in the wood by the deep sea. These books traveled all over the world, and some of them came into the hands of the emperor. He sat in his golden chair reading and reading on. Every moment he nodded his head, for it pleased him to find the beautiful descriptions of the city, the castle, and the garden. Then he came to the words, "But the nightingale is the best of all." "What is this?" said he. "I don't know the nightingale at all. Is there such a bird in my empire, and even in my garden? I have never heard of it. Fancy learning such a thing for the first time from a book." Hereupon he called his chamberlain, who was so important that when any one of lower rank than himself dared to speak to him or to ask him anything, he would only answer, "Poh," and that meant nothing. "There is said to be a most remarkable bird here, called the nightingale," said the emperor. "They said it is the finest thing in my great empire. Why have I never been told about this?" "I have never heard it mentioned before," said the chamberlain. "It has never been presented at court." "I wish it to come and sing before me this evening," said the emperor. "The whole world knows what I possess, while I myself do not." "I have never heard it mentioned before," said the chamberlain, "but I shall look for it, and I shall find it." But where was it to be found? The chamberlain ran up and down all the stairs, through the halls and corridors, but not one of those whom he met had heard the nightingale. So he ran back to the emperor, who said that it must certainly be an invention of those people who wrote books. "Your imperial majesty will scarcely believe," said he, "what things are written in books. It is all fiction and something that is called the black art. But the book in which I have read this," said the emperor, "has been sent to me by the high and mighty emperor of Japan, and there cannot therefore be anything untrue in it. I will hear the nightingale. It must be here this evening. It has my highest favor. If it does not come, the whole court shall be trampled upon after supper." "Sing pei," said the chamberlain, and ran up and down all the stairs again, and through all the halls and corridors, and half the court ran with him, for they were not at all desirous of being trampled upon. Then there was a great inquiry after the remarkable nightingale, which was known to all the world except the people at court. At last they came upon the poor little girl in the kitchen, who said, "Dear me, I know the nightingale well, and it can sing too. Every evening I have leave to take home to my poor sick mother the scraps from the table. She lives down by the seashore, and when I am tired, I sit down to rest in the wood as I come back, and then I hear the nightingale sing. It makes the tears come into my eyes, and I feel just as if my mother were kissing me." "Little maid," said the chamberlain, "I will get you an appointment in the kitchen, and permission to see the emperor dine. if you will lead us to the nightingale, for it has been commanded to appear this evening." So they all went out into the wood where the nightingale was wont to sing. Half the court was there. When they were well on their way, a cow began to low. "Oh," said the courtiers, "now we've got it. What wonderful power in such a small creature. I have certainly heard it before." "No, those are cows lowing," said the little maid. "We are a long way from the place yet." Some frogs began to croak in the marsh. "Beautiful," said the Chinese court chaplain. "Now I hear it. It sounds exactly like little church bells." "No," said the little maid. "Those are frogs. But I think we shall soon hear it now." And then the nightingale began to sing. "That's it," said the little girl. "Hark, hark, there it sits." And she pointed out the little gray bird upon the branches. "Is it possible?" said the chamberlain. "I should never have imagined it like that. How simple it looks. I suppose it has lost its color at seeing so many grand people around it." "Little nightingale," the little maid called out in a loud tone, "our most gracious emperor wishes you to sing to him." "With the greatest pleasure," said the nightingale, and sang so nicely that it was a pleasure to hear it. "It sounds exactly like glass bells," said the chamberlain. "And look at its little throat, how it works. It is remarkable that we've never heard it before. It will be a great success at court." "Shall I sing before the emperor again?" asked the nightingale, believing that the emperor was also present. "My excellent little nightingale," said the chamberlain, "I have great pleasure in inviting you to a court festival this evening, when you will bewitch his imperial majesty with your charming song." "That is best heard in the woods," says the nightingale, but still it came willingly when it heard the emperor wished it. The castle had been elegantly decorated. The walls and the floors, which were of porcelain, glittered with the light of many thousands of golden lamps. The most beautiful flowers, which tinkled merrily, stood in the corridors. In fact, what with the running to and fro and the draught, the bells tinkled so loudly that you could not hear yourself speak. In the center of the great hall in which the emperor sat, a golden perch had been fixed for the nightingale. The whole court was present, and the little kitchen maid, having now received the title of a real court cook, had obtained permission to stand behind the door. All were dressed in their very best, and all had their eyes on the little gray bird to whom the emperor nodded. The nightingale sang so beautifully that tears came into the emperor's eyes and ran down his cheeks, and when the bird sang still more beautifully, it went straight to one's heart. The emperor was so pleased that he said the nightingale should have his golden slipper to wear around its neck. But the nightingale declined with thanks, saying that it had already received sufficient reward. "I have seen tears in the emperor's eyes, and that is the greatest treasure for me. The emperor's tears have a wonderful power. Heaven knows I have been sufficiently rewarded." Thereupon she again sang her beautiful, sweet voice. "That is the sweetest coquetry that we know," said the ladies who were standing round, and then took water in their mouths to make them cluck when anyone spoke to them. This made them think they were nightingales too. Even the footmen and the chambermaids allowed themselves to express their satisfaction. That is saying a good deal, for they are the hardest to please. In a word, the nightingale was a great success. It is now to remain at court, have its own cage, and liberty to go out twice a day, once during the night. It was then accompanied by 12 servants, each of whom held it fast by a silken string attached to its leg. There was by no means any pleasure in such flying. The whole city talked about the wonderful bird, and if two people met, they would say to the other, "Nightin," and the other would answer, "Gale," and then they sighed and understood each other. 11 peddlers' children had even been named after the bird. though not one of them could sing a note. One day the emperor received a large parcel on which was written, "The Nightingale." "Here we have a new book about our celebrated bird," said the emperor. It was no book, however, but a small work of art, which lay in a casket, an artificial nightingale, supposed to look like the living one, but covered all over with diamonds, rubies, and sapphires. As soon as the imitation bird had been wound up, it could sing one of the pieces that the real bird sang, and then it would move its tail up and down, all glittering with silver and gold. Round its neck hung a little ribbon in which was written, "The Emperor of Japan's nightingale is poor compared with that of the Emperor of China." "How beautiful!" they all cried, and he who had brought the artificial bird immediately received the title of Imperial Nightingale Bringer-in-Chief. Now they must sing together. What a lovely duet that will be. And so they had to sing together, but it did not go very well, for the real bird sang in its own way, and the imitation one sang only waltzes. "That is not the new one's fault," said the music master. "It sings in perfect time, and quite according to my method." So the imitation bird had to sing alone. It had quite as great a success as the real one. Besides, it was much prettier to look at, glittering like bracelets and breastpins. 33 times it sang, one and the same tune, and was still not tired. The courtiers would like to have heard it all over again, but the emperor thought that the live nightingale ought now to sing something as well. But where was it? No one had noticed it flying out the window back to its green woods. "But how is that?" said the emperor. And all the courtiers blamed the nightingale, and thought it was a most ungrateful creature. "In any way, we have the best bird," they said. And so the imitation one had to sing again, which made the 34th time that they had heard the same tune. Even then, they did not know it by heart, for it was much too difficult. The music master praised the bird exceedingly. Indeed, he assured them that it was better than a nightingale, not only in its dress and the number of beautiful diamonds, but also for its inside. "For see, your gracious majesty and my lords, with a real nightingale we never know what is coming next, but with the artificial one everything is arranged. You can open it, you can explain it, and make people understand how the waltzes lie, how they work, and why one note follows the other." "That is just what we think too," they all said. And the music master received permission to show the bird to the people on the following Sunday. The emperor commanded that they should also hear it sing. When they did so, they were pleased as if they had all got drunk on tea, which is a Chinese fashion. And they all said, "Oh," and held up their first fingers and nodded. But the poor fisherman, who had heard the real nightingale, said, "It sounds pretty enough. The tunes are all alike, too. But there is something wanting. I didn't know that. Or I didn't know what." The real nightingale was banished from the country on the empire. The imitation bird had its place on a silk cushion close to the emperor's bed, and all the presents which it had received lay around it, and it had been promoted to rank of number 1 on the left, with the title of Grand Imperial Toilet Table Singer. The emperor considered the left side, on which the heart lies, as the most noble, and an emperor has his heart on the left, just like other people. The music master, too, wrote a work of 25 volumes about the artificial bird. It was so learned and so long and so full of the most difficult Chinese words that all the people said they had read it and understood it, for otherwise they would have been thought stupid and had their bodies trampled upon. For a whole year it went on like that. The emperor, the court, and all the other Chinamen knew every turn in the artificial bird's song by heart, and that was just why it pleased them now more than ever. They could sing with it, and often did so too. The street boys sang seet seet see cluck cluck cluck, and the emperor did just the same. It was really most beautiful. One evening, when the artificial bird was singing its best, and the emperor was laying in bed and listening to it, something inside the bird snapped with a bang. All the wheels ran around with a whir, and then the music stopped. The emperor immediately jumped out of bed and sent for his physician. But what could he do? Then they fetched the watchmaker, and, after a good deal of talking and examining, he got the bird into something like order. But he said that it must not be used too much, as the barrels were worn out, and it was impossible to put in new ones with any certainty of the music going right. Now there was great sorrow. The imitation bird could only be allowed to sing once a year, and even that was almost too much. On these occasions, the music master would make a little speech full of big words and say that the singing was just as good as ever, and after that, of course, the court were as well pleased as before. 5 years had now passed, and a great sorrow fell upon the land. The Chinese were all really very fond of their emperor, and now he was ill and could not live long, they said. A new emperor had already been chosen, and the people stood out in the street and asked the chamberlain how their old emperor was. Pah, he said, and shook his head. Cold and pale lay the emperor in his great, splendid bed. The whole court thought he was dead, and everyone ran away to greet the new emperor. The pages ran out to gossip about it, and the maids of honor had a grand tea party. Cloth had been laid down in all the halls and corridors, so that no footsteps could be heard, and it was therefore very, very quiet. But the emperor was not dead yet. Stiff and pale he lay on the splendid bed with the long velvet curtains and the heavy gold tassels, and high up a window stood open, and the moon shined in upon him and the artificial bird. The poor emperor could hardly breathe. He felt as though something were sitting on his chest. He opened his eyes and saw that it was Death who was sitting there. He had put on the emperor's golden crown and held his golden sword in one hand and his beautiful flag in the other. All around, strange heads peered out from the folds of the large velvet bed curtains. Some were hideous, others were sweet and gentle. These were all the emperor's bad and good deeds, which were staring at him now that Death was sitting on his heart. Do you remember this? They whispered one after another. Do you recollect that? And then they told him of so much that the perspiration ran down from his brow. I did not know, cried the emperor. Music, music, the great Chinese drum, he shouted, so that I may not have to hear what they say. But the music went on, and Death nodded like a Chinaman to all that was said. Music, music, shrieked the emperor. You precious little golden bird, sing, do sing. I have given you gold and jewels. I have hung even my gold slipper around your neck. Sing, I say, sing. But the bird was silent. It could not sing without being wound up, and there was no one to do it. Death continued to stare at the emperor with his large, hollow eyes, and all was still, terribly still. Suddenly, from the window came the sound of the sweetest singing. It was the real little nightingale sitting on a bough outside. It had heard how the emperor was suffering, and had therefore come to console him and bring him hope by its singing. And as it sang, the ghostly heads grew paler and paler. The blood began to flow faster and faster through the emperor's weak limbs, and even Death listened and said, Go on, little nightingale, go on. Yes, but will you give me the beautiful golden sword? Will you give me the rich banner? Will you give me the emperor's rich crown? And Death gave up each of these treasures for a song, while the nightingale still went on singing. It sang of the quiet churchyard where the white roses grow, where the elder tree scents in the air, and where the fresh grass is moistened by the tears of those who are left behind. Then Death longed to be in his garden, and floated out through the window like a cold white mist. Thanks, thanks, said the Emperor, you heavenly little bird. I know you well, and it was you that I drove out of my country and my empire, and still you have charmed away the evil faces from my bed and removed death from my heart. How can I reward you? You have rewarded me, said the nightingale. I drew tears from your eyes when for the first time I sang to you. That I shall never forget. They are jewels that gladden the heart of a singer. But sleep now, and get well and strong again, and I will sing you something. And as it sang, the emperor fell into a sweet slumber. Oh, how mild and refreshing was that sleep! The sun shined upon him through the window when he awoke, strong and well. None of his servants had returned, for they believed he was dead. Only the nightingale was still sitting by him singing. You must always stay with me, said the emperor. You shall now sing only when you like, and I shall smash the imitation bird into 1,000 pieces. Don't do that, said the nightingale. It did its best, as long as it could. Keep it, as before. I cannot build my nest and live in the castle, but let me come just when I like. In the evening I will sit on that bough near your window and sing something to you, so that you shall be joyful and pensive at the same time. I will sing of those who are happy and of those who suffer. I will sing of the good and the bad that are hidden all around you. The little singing bird flies far away to the poor fisherman, to the peasant's cottage, to all who are far removed from you and your court. I love your heart more than your crown, and yet the crown has almost a halo of holiness around it. I will come and I will sing to you, but you must promise me one thing. Everything, said the emperor, and standing there in his imperial robes, which he had himself put on, he pressed his sword, all heavy with gold, to his heart. I only ask one thing. Let no one know that you have a little bird that tells you everything. It will be for the best. Saying this, the nightingale flew away. The servants came in to look after their dead emperor. When they saw him, they stood aghast, and the emperor said, "Good morning." I think I'm only going to read that one for tonight, as my voice is not as good as it could be. Is it? Thank you to anybody who's here with me. Yeah, I'm okay, bro. My voice is just a little dry, and yeah, I'm doing okay. I appreciate it. But yeah, so I think I'm gonna end this here, and is it tomorrow? Sagril is going to play video games. Thursday, I'll play some games with him, and Friday should be Monster Hunter. So I will probably see you guys all again on on Thursday. So thank you all for your patience, and I hope everyone enjoyed the story, and I will see you next time.
Loving